Hi, and welcome to The Fault Line, a CMG consulting podcast exploring the pivotal moments where business strategy meets real-world pressure. Hosted by myself, Gary Lancina, and my co-host, Kim Scribner. Today, we're going to consider cracks in the culture and how trust can turn into competitive advantage. And we've brought in a special guest, our friend Aniela, who is a tremendous coach and also a collaborator with much of the work that we do when we're working with leadership teams across different industries. I won't go any further on that. I'm going to pass it over to Aniela and let her introduce herself before we dig into the topic today.
Thank you, Gary. So, Aniela Larson, I am an independent consultant that partners with CMG. I'm a change enablement coach, a leadership coach, and consultant, facilitator, and kind of in my spare time, whatever is left, I'm working on research and learning more about corporate trauma, what that looks like, how that shows up, and the damage that it does to us.
Thank you. Awesome. And as soon as you said corporate trauma, I felt my body give a shudder of PTSD. I think many of the people out there who might listen to this have experienced it. And, the focus is really on creating the conditions that don't result in trauma, because that's where good things can happen. And, I think that's an entree into the specifics for today as we think about teams, as we think about places we've worked. Oftentimes we'll find two different groups on the surface of it, maybe given similar tasks, new product development effort, a line extension, a new promotional campaign, a change management effort, thinking through all of that. But despite the fact that they look on the surface the same functional representation, same degree of experience and tenure, one of them seems to move a lot faster than the other. And I'm kind of curious, because I have a strong opinion about this around the role that trust might play there. And so I'm just going to ask each of you, at a gut check level, what's the first word when I say trust at work that comes to mind for each of you?
Aniela, I'll leave it to you first.
Speed to market.
All right, well, she got 3 words, so I'm going to take a couple of more than 3 words. I think for me, it's I know that my peers or people working on the project with me are going to do what they say they're going to do.
For me, the sort of trick here is that trust is one of those fundamental ingredients that builds confidence in the intentions and an ability to rely on other team members for their competencies and ask for help. I'm curious, and maybe I'll start with you, Kim, on this, and we'll work back the other way. Where have you felt that in a workplace, and maybe some thoughts about how to measure it?
Yeah, I think I can point to specific teams where I felt it, and it was definitely where the leader of that team provided clarity of what we were intending to do. So we had clarity, and that allowed us to make agreements on what our roles were, and those agreements led to trust over time. And so we needed the environment to be set for us. And I can still feel the trust of that team and still connected with those folks today because of those experiences.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So how we feel trust is, I think it's the demonstration of behavior that reduces question in our mind. So as long as as soon as we start questioning something or thinking of a different interpretation, that's a signal that you may not have trust. So it's not the direct answer maybe necessarily that you were looking for, but it's, when you have it and you also know when you don't.
It's interesting. I did some research years ago that talked about sort of clarity of purpose, which Kim, you just discussed as, an attribute of trust. but this idea of what we're trying to achieve together and our ability to trust one another. And I'm kind of curious how the nuance between those two works as you think about teams that maybe had clarity but didn't have trust, or examples when lack of trust slowed down what on the surface of it appeared to be a very solid executional intention or plan. So, Aniela, I'll start with you there because you're nodding your head and you probably got a deep list of examples.
Well, I mean, I love this one because as change enable consultants or change consultants, we are not often called in to organizations that are doing it all right. Right? There's generally
True.
an element of like something is simmering under the surface. So
Or boiling right on top of the surface.
or boiling right there. Absolutely. So I think of like one example that I saw really early on in my career as a consultant, was when decisions would repeatedly, okay, so we would go into a meeting, decisions would be recorded. Everybody in the room nodding their heads. Yes, we agree with this decision. We are going to stop selling this product in this channel because the data shows it is not sustainable. Beautiful. Except one team did no work to remove that product from that channel. Another team did all of the work. And so you're looking at this one team that wasn't doing the work, and they weren't doing the work because they knew, like deep down, they either wanted to sabotage the decision or they didn't trust that it was going to come to fruition. So why would they do work for it? And the other team was really kind of thinking, yes, we have the data. We believe in this. We trust this is the right direction. We trust the leader, maybe. And they're doing the work. But what happened was because the team that didn't do the work, that maybe didn't trust the direction, that maybe thought they were going to change it, like created an even bigger rupture of trust for that one team that was doing the work. So
Sure, it's a betrayal.
in the end, the entire organization kind of ended up at this paralysis point of, okay, well, we actually can't move forward. And in that loss of momentum, that decision died.
I think
Publicly.
what you're talking about there is a perfect description of trust, right? Because it's lack of belief is what you're talking about. And that is the epitome of there's no trust, right? There's this artificial harmony. Everybody's in the meeting, they're shaking their heads up and down, and then they walk out and they do whatever they actually think should happen without communicating it to anybody also. And that lack of belief stalls projects all the time.
And for me, the key point underneath what we just talked about is that lack of trust, which is an emotional attribute, shows up in behaviors. It shows up in hallway conversations. It shows up in missing milestones. It shows up in telling things to superiors or even team members that aren't true. My sense is that it's rare that someone will come right out and say, I intend to sabotage the initiative. Right?
May I share a story because I feel so compelled?
Please do.
This happened to me before I was a consultant. I was new to the organization, was really excited, was there as a product manager, driving this initiative. A few, maybe 1 or 2 months into my time there, someone came to me and said, by the way, so-and-so went to leadership and said you stole her work to drive this initiative. I was like, my integrity though? You're challenging my integrity?
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, for a lot of folks, that story of betrayal that you just shared is going to resonate. It's going to feel relatable. And the trick is to understand that we all face betrayals. We betray ourselves at times, too many late night chips. We betray, people we care about. And sometimes we're on the receiving end of betrayals, either explicit and intentional or inadvertent. There's an opportunity in those moments to actually build the credibility, build the trust that we I think all three of us believe is so fundamental to great work by teams, to have the conversation, to get things that are under the surface out in the open, to do it in a way that's not harsh or aggressive at the person or the people who may be involved, but is really focused on achieving the objective. And, in terms of how we do that, I'm curious, Kim, because, you're a wizard at measuring performance indicators and how those play a role in tracking team performance. How might trust and the ability to have those open conversations related to specific indicators of progress or achievement play out for you?
Yeah. So I think trust is a hard thing to measure quantitatively, but qualitatively, especially as observational coaches, you can see when it's happening and when it's not. And one of the ways that that might show up is if there is no debate ever in a team meeting, there probably also is not trust, because none of the three of us have ever walked into an organization and just seen complete alignment on the path forward to all the things and requires no discussion whatsoever, right? So if that feels like it's the perfect meeting, there's probably something underneath the surface there. So that's one of the qualitative kind of ways to see that as an observational coach. And you're also going to observe the meetings after the meetings, the two sets of metrics, the metrics that you show to the president and the product owner, the metrics that the team holds for themselves. So those
Indeed.
are indicators.
Yeah, and I think there's another one for me that's this inverse relationship. Little time spent in discussion and debate means more time spent on execution or suboptimal results, right? Or teams feel pressured to be compliant rather than free to be collaborative. Oftentimes, the process is then suboptimal, and I can speak from firsthand experience, and I'm guessing a lot of folks can as well, about being in a room where the objective was crystal clear. People were not necessarily bought into it, but they were being compelled to execute. And so you get the sort of minimal effort, the foot dragging, the thing that shows up as, missed milestones, latency, poor delivery on criteria for the objective of the initiative to begin with, versus, hey, you know what? You look at a team where there's some pretty heated and spirited debate in the room, and then the end of meeting fist bump and everybody goes off and does their stuff. And stepping back from those, you can look at the sort of objective measures and say, well, wow, it felt intense during the discussion, but look how smoothly the execution goes. Go ahead, Aniela. Yeah, I know you've got stuff to contribute there.
I just was thinking, in addition to how you might measure trust is not by measuring actually trust, but it's by measuring productivity, effectiveness, efficiency, value delivered, time to, it's all of those other metrics that we really care about that together tell you whether or not you have trust, if you have trust, if it's high or low.
Yeah, it's that rework piece, right? If we're constantly redoing things because we weren't having the difficult conversations up front, so we didn't really understand what it was we were trying to accomplish, that's an example. Yes.
So let's look at a couple of concrete aspects of that. If I were to ask the question, when did trust, without a doubt, make things better or faster for a team? I'll start with Kim on this one. Any artifacts or behaviors that would lead you to say, yeah, this is going to go well?
Not the same team I was talking about before, but a different team very early in my career. So I would say there was an element of youth and motivation and entrepreneurship that existed in this team that I'm talking about. So people wanted to be there in the moment. And we were in the midst, I live in South Florida, some of you know that, and we were in the midst of a hurricane. And we were also in the midst of putting out a production release of our product that was broadly advertised to our customers who were not mostly in Florida and didn't care that we were having a hurricane. And we had to band together in a moment where we were also focused on our families and concerned about, when is our personal power going to come on in our houses? But because we had such trust in each other, um, we put out a release of software that was several months in the making around a dining room table at my boss's house in Miami, in Hollandale, if those of you know where that is. And it was because we all trusted each other and had faith that everybody was doing their part that we were able to accomplish that with speed.
Yeah, I love it. And by the way, I appreciate that story much more so than, hey, here's the format for decision rights. And, not that those are bad. We all need to have a framework on how we make choices. But, that example of the resilience that a team can have when faced with all that external pressure because they trust one another, that ability to solve for the unexpected is one of the hallmarks for me of high trust teams. Aniela, you're nodding your head. Anything that you would talk about in that regard? How leaders act, how people appreciate what the leaders say?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the best way to demonstrate kind of when I saw trust make things faster was by removing something that was hindering trust. So in this one example, we were working with a team, as we often do. In this particular instance, the leader of the team was a micromanager. Like everything needed to be approved, everything needed to be explained. He was calling the shots, nobody else. So what you had was decision-making paralysis. You had going up, like delegating up. You had delays in kind of processes and approvals and all of those things. So we reassigned the leader to a different area or gave him an extra project and worked with the team to say, no, you've got this. You got this. It was like night and day. Like before, it would take them 3 months to deliver a piddly little piece of functionality that really wasn't meeting the customer needs. And 4 weeks, they had delivered a exceptionally high request feature for their customers. So that was just like value delivery in action as soon as we got trust reestablished in that team.
Trust is this accelerator that actually doesn't cost any money, right?
It can cost human capital, right? So
and especially if you squander it, right? Because it is one of those things that is takes time to build and is easy to erode. And so, the feedback loops, I touched on betrayal before. We're all fallible. We all make mistakes. I think as we think about trust, and this will probably lead me into a couple of examples with you, but I think there are also behaviors that can save the trust after a moment, a glitch that can actually be integrity building for a leader or a team member. And so, I'm going to sort of spin it around and ask each of you to maybe give a little example. And I'll start with you, Aniela. Like, let's think about a cross-functional team intending to launch something. How might someone approach the idea of building that team? What are some of those first behaviors that can sort of lay the foundation of trust that can be leveraged over the course of the project?
For me, it's always around what you say and what you do. So case in point, let me communicate as a leader the why to you. But actually communicating the why isn't enough. I need to then also communicate what this might cost, how this might cause discomfort in us. And what I love to see, and I don't necessarily see enough of, is when leaders say, This is what I have to sacrifice that presently benefits me in order to make this work. And we're in this together.
That's terrific. I appreciate that. So, Kim, maybe shifting over to you, similar circumstance, right? But let's think about a team where there needs to be some repair, right? There might be issues, and the trust has to be saved. How might you think about that or approach that task to get the team back on solid footing?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you two answers. One part of what you just asked me, and the other is to add on to what Aniela was talking about. I think one of the things that I've seen when you're building a brand new team, so before the trust gets broken, answer is letting the team members opt in to the team instead of
Yes.
assigning people to a team will give them more buy-in. Generally speaking, they understand who they're opting in with, they understand who the other potential members are. That also works if you're hiring a new team member and you let the existing team members do some of the interviewing to hire somebody into their team. When you get to the moment where trust has already been broken, this is going to sound a little bit ruthless, but you got to go a little military about it. You might have to break the team down before you build them up again.
Say more.
And what I mean there is, what's the real actual problem? Because it's not often what we see on the surface. And that is going to require a lot of one-to-one conversations with somebody who is trusted, but doesn't have any skin in the game, so to speak, from what the team is trying to deliver, because their objectives would be different. So having an external member of the team, not necessarily external to the organization per se, who can get to the root cause of what broke the trust to begin with. It could be something simple. It could be something like, they didn't sit with me at lunch and therefore I don't feel like I can trust them, right? Like, we're all still humans and these high school-ish things still show up in the workplace, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
And it could be something much more complicated than that. Like, a person on the team doesn't have the skill or capability to deliver what they're supposed to, and they're trying to hide that. And so you need to build the environment where they will talk to a person so that you can get to the root cause of what the problem is. Otherwise, you're just going to continue to build more artificial harmony on top of what was artificially there before.
Oh, yeah. And that sort of facade is just debilitating. Listening to each of you, and I appreciate the wisdom you bring to these topics. One you just touched on, Kim, is this concept that I come back to over and over again. Take the implicit and make it explicit. Get it out in the open. Be transparent about it. It's not as dangerous as you might think, right? One of the most powerful human emotions is embarrassment. And if we can create a greater degree of safety, it helps. And I think the other thing that was touched on in both of your examples is this idea of change is choice. So with a leader who's open and talks about trade-offs, Aniela, to go back to your example, this concept of, I'm seeing a role model here. I can talk about this stuff. I'll choose to buy in. I think those are important attributes as we build and maintain this sort of trusting team environment. So let's shift gears slightly and be a little bit more, guiding. If I were to ask each of you, and I'll start with you, Aniela, try this Monday. Hey, people out there, what's one move that somebody listening could just pick up and attempt this week? What would you encourage them to do?
Well, if trust is the elephant in the room for you, call Kim.
We appreciate that. I won't give your number away on air, Kim, but
Call CMG.
You can be found on LinkedIn. There's not that many Kim Scribners out there. So, Aniela, while we're waiting for Kim to work out her technical difficulties, just a quick thing here. What was it that got you into this space? You focus on trauma in the workplace. You focus on how to make teams better. You're a magnificent coach. What was the thing that was the catalyst for you to say, I'm going to make this part of my career. This is going to be my purpose.
I consulted for a team where the CAO was walked out in handcuffs after threatening their team members.
Wow. That is a high intensity moment.
Things seldom get like that. But when I was working with them a little time after, and the director who called us in kept saying, we have corporate trauma. We have corporate trauma. You need to help us. And so having had my own experiences and having gone through and seen and, got the t-shirt, it cemented for me that this is real. This is happening pretty much everywhere, unfortunately. And too often it's excused under the guise of corporate culture.
Yeah, I get that. It's interesting. I've done a couple of turnarounds in my career, and there are times when businesses are running pretty well, right? And then something happens. There's a shock to the system, could be a technology disruption, could be a change in market appeal, could be, a change in leadership. But that idea of the shock to the system, to the moment of intensity and the half-life on that and the lingering effects, I think is a takeaway here. And it's part of the validation of why staying focused, not just on the tasks, but also the culture is so crucial. For a lot of people, they throw their hand up and they're like, culture, oh, that's soft, squishy stuff. And yet, being the emotional critters that humans are, without the safety, the ability to contribute, the sense of belonging, the sense of common purpose, all those quote unquote soft attributes, the results actually look worse. And I think that's the insight for me that is frequently the most compelling, is to actually be able to tie back the type of things that you do to the hard business results. And, I'm wondering if you've got another example where, whether it was time to market or exceeding impact in the market, or it was achieving something with a reduced budget, is there an example that you can think of where you were able to help a team do certain things, behave in certain ways, and then be able to measure the outcome, not on the emotional side of things, but in the hard and fast business impact?
It's interesting. So not everyone is coachable, but when we work with coachable clients, and I'm thinking just like on the coaching end right now, right?
Oh, this is great. Yeah.
When you have individuals who are introspective, who are able to kind of be honest with themselves and kind of, kudos to calling out that embarrassment and shame being such strong drivers of behavior, for individuals who are able to kind of get past that internalized shame and say, I hold biases around this. This is my personal value that I assign to that. When we are able to surface those hidden beliefs, we can then see that come out in the financial metrics. So here's an example. I was working with someone who believed that they had to do everything that was asked of them. Everything. They weren't able to say no. Doesn't matter where it came from. We were working on that. And what was happening before was she wasn't able to deliver on everything she was saying yes to. And so trust there was starting to erode because she was just so over capacity. So we surfaced that bias and that value about like, oh, I can't say no, and started working on it. And she started tentatively, but she did, pushing back and saying, well, I can't do this right now. Or what would you like me to take off the list? Or, what isn't going to kill us if we don't do? And so she started delivering more, actually,
Yeah.
on time, built trust. And so what that translated into kind of financially was actual value delivery.
Yep. And, that example is so powerful because it's the blending of this idea of my personal boundaries. I have a capacity limit with the building of integrity in the eyes of the other people with whom you're working. And it's a courage moment to say no for many folks. And at the same time, that one little no actually indicates to the other person, okay, I'm dealing with someone who's aware of their circumstances. They're being very intentional about what they're committing and what they're not committing. And to go back to something we talked about early on in trust, the connection between what you say and what you do is profound. And so if somebody says, I can't do it right now, or I could do it, but I'd have to give something up, or I could do it, I think there's somebody else who's actually better at it. There are a number of different ways of answering it without just sort of the blunt shutdown, nope, never, that actually are conducive to better teams. I'm going to pause here and just give a quick update. Kim Scribner just made us all aware that she's okay, but is suffering a power outage. So that's why she got disconnected on this one. We're going to bring this home, just the two of us. So Aniela, I'm glad you're here with me on this. If I were to ask you for just a quick observation, maybe one red flag, one green flag about trust in a team environment, what would your answer be?
Red flag, instantly meeting after the meeting. Green flag, showing that we have good trust when there is discourse and potentially problem-solving conflict in a team, and people leave that team saying thank you.
Yeah.
Or leave that meeting.
Gratitude for the disagreement, right?
Yes.
Oh, I love that. Love that. So let me just recap a little bit. We've been talking a lot. We've been using the word trust over and over and over again. The assertion that we're making here is high trust teams make decisions faster and they make better decisions. They generate buy-in and commitment among the team members, and they ultimately deliver better results for the business. And I think for me, that is the underline on all of it, is the better results for the business.
Yeah.
Being on time, being on strategy, being on budget, delivering the results. It's a pretty simple menu of criteria, and trust doesn't hurt any of it. Trust helps with all of it. So, Aniela, I want to give you the last word on this before I say goodbye to everybody for this episode. Give us some drops of wisdom on this.
In today's market, where we're looking at efficiencies, where we're looking at cutting costs, the one thing that we really, really need to be looking at is where do we have trust and where do we not have trust in our organization? Because if you want a competitive advantage, if you want to be able to do more faster in a cost-effective way, it is all based on trust. So stop looking at the balance sheet and look at the trust.
Fabulous. I couldn't have said anything to improve that. So I'm just going to wrap it up right now. Thanks for listening to The Fault Line, everyone. This is CMG Consulting's podcast. For more insights, visit cmgconsulting.com or follow us on LinkedIn. Thanks very much. Talk to you again soon.